I wasn't always invisible. It took 20 years of swallowing silence to disappear completely. The trees lining the cul-de-sac wore their annual autumn garb like reluctant party guests, bronzed, brittle, beautiful only from afar. I pulled into the driveway of the Dawson house with the exact same feeling. The front yard was overdone as usual. Straw scarecrow, faux hay bales, and a pilgrim-themed welcome mat that no one actually read. Thanksgiving week in Madison, Wisconsin. The cold had teeth sharper than I remembered, and so did the air inside the house. Marla greeted me first. I never called her mom in my head anymore. Her arms wrapped around me with the theatrical tightness of a woman auditioning for sainthood. I stiffened out of reflex, but she smelled like cinnamon and the idea of home. "You're thinner," she said, already patting my back, already letting go. Frank didn't come to the door. I heard him from the living room, ESPN echoing off the hardwood floor, his heavy voice criticizing the Badgers' defense. I walked past the coat slung over the stair railing, my own boots squeaking against freshly polished wood. In the kitchen, the tension simmered beneath the scent of pie and gravy. I was home technically. I just wasn't sure whose. Zach was in the middle of a story naturally. Legs wide, bourbon and hand charm oozing from every idle gesture. He was talking about his latest app, this time for micro-investors or something to do with crypto wallets. I stopped listening at the word traction. "You really scored that Series A," Frank's voice boomed from the couch. Zach didn't look at me. Let's just say certain backers saw potential. My face remained neutral, like I'd trained it to be in conference rooms. Frank chuckled like a man who'd just found a son he could finally be proud of. Now that's what I'm talking about. Real-world hustle. I stood there, still holding my bag, unsure whether to interject or simply vanish into the woodwork. No one offered to take my coat. No one asked about the consulting firm I'd built from the ground up. But Zach. He got bourbon poured into Frank's best crystal. A single malt that Dad only opened for people who earned it. I slipped off my boots. Walked into the kitchen. Pecan pie on the counter. Pumpkin pie cooling on the windowsill. The smell made something deep in my chest tighten. Not nostalgia, more like warning. Emily appeared near the fridge, clutching a diet soda like it was armor. "Hey," she whispered. "You okay?" I nodded without meaning it. Her eyes held mine for a second too long. Then she looked away. Even at 22, she knew how to read the room better than most. Marla swooped in behind her. "Claire, darling, I put you in the guest room. Zach needed his old space back for calls and equipment." Calls and equipment. That could mean anything. Could also mean nothing. "Sure," I replied. My voice sounded distant even to me. Zach strolled in now with his shirt untucked like a man entitled to the house he didn't pay for. He clapped me on the back. "Glad you made it, sis," he said. "It's good for Mom to have all of us here. You know, all of us. Like I wasn't part of that us without permission." Marla began listing off tasks like a drill sergeant in pearls. Stuffing needed checking, the yams were burning, and the turkey timer was probably lying again. She handed me a dish towel. I folded it, unfolded it, then started chopping parsley that didn't really need chopping. Just to do something. Frank's voice carried from the living room again. "Tell Claire what that investor from Austin said." "Zach." Zach grinned, poured himself another 2 fingers of bourbon. "Said I was solving a real problem. That I wasn't just coding, I was innovating." I gripped the cutting board harder. He hadn't coded anything. He'd forwarded my prototype. He didn't even change the splash screen. "Real success doesn't come from behind a laptop." Frank added the words, wrapped in a laugh but heavy with something else. "Gotta get your hands dirty, Claire." It hit me like a slap that was somehow expected. The kind that doesn't leave a bruise but still changes the way you sit. No one looked at me. Not directly. I set the knife down. Marla handed me a bowl to stir. The handle was warm, like it had been waiting for my hand. "I still don't get why she bothers coming home," Frank muttered later in the hallway, low and deliberate. "She's not one of us anymore. I wasn't supposed to hear that, but I did. Every syllable. I excused myself from the bustle and walked back into the kitchen. It was empty for a brief, breathless second. The carving knife glinted from the butcher block, long, polished, theatrical in its silence. I didn't pick it up to use it. I picked it up to remind myself how sharp silence can be. Every single view means a meal for someone in need. Just by watching this video, you're giving warmth, hope, and a full plate to those less fortunate. So watch now, share now, subscribe to the channel, and let's spread love together. Thanksgiving, where gratitude is measured by how well you fake a smile. The dining room looked like something out of a catalog. Candles flickered from antique brass holders. Marla's prized china glinted under soft yellow lighting. Everything had been arranged to project harmony, right down to the perfectly folded napkins tucked into ceramic turkeys. It was a setting built to impress, not to comfort. I wondered how many times this room had housed more tension than turkey. Zach was already seated when I walked in, hands steepled like he was hosting a board meeting instead of a family meal. Frank occupied his usual post at the head of the table, back ramrod straight, like even this ritual demanded military posture. Marla floated between chairs, adjusting forks a quarter inch at a time. Aunt Linda sat at the far end, quiet, alert. She hadn't spoken much since arriving, but I felt her watching me like she knew I was a lit fuse. Small talk exploded like popcorn weather football, some vaguely sexist joke from a cousin I could never quite remember. Zach took over naturally, turning the dinner into his own TED Talk. The app's doing numbers, he said, beaming. We've got early traction, user retention is crazy good. Angel investors lined up like it's Black Friday. A few aunts and uncles clapped politely. Frank leaned in, pride swelling behind his glasses. That's my boy. Took a risk. That's what men do. I set down my wine glass. I hadn't planned to say anything. But then Zach added, that bridge funding from October. Yeah, sealed by a top-tier angel. Guy used to work with PayPal. My jaw tightened. That bridge loan didn't come from any angel investor. It came from me. From a quiet $25K I wired when his original pitch deck collapsed and no one would touch it. I wasn't even listed on the cap table. He'd promised to correct that. I cleared my throat. Actually, that October funding was a personal bridge loan, not angel capital. The room stilled, forks suspended midair. Zach's expression didn't falter, but his left eye twitched. Frank turned slowly toward me. Why do you always have to make things about you? It wasn't a question. It was an accusation dressed in disappointment. I felt 1,000 responses press against my teeth. None of them escaped. Instead, I picked up my water, drank, and let the silence do the shouting. Marla jumped in like a lifeguard, waving a dish in the air. Cranberry sauce, everyone, let's not ruin the holiday, please. Ladles moved, plates scraped, but the warmth had drained from the room. Across the table, Aunt Linda still hadn't spoken, but her gaze held mine for one full beat and then dropped to her lap. That was the closest thing to a nod I'd get tonight. Conversation resumed in brittle fragments. Someone asked about airport delays. Someone else complimented the stuffing. I felt like a ghost haunting my own childhood. Everyone could see me, but no one really wanted to. Zach tapped his glass with a spoon. Hey Claire, didn't you go to Wharton or something, Yale? I said evenly. Right. Ivy's Ivy. He grinned. Hey, maybe you can look over the next round of our pitch deck. As if I hadn't already rewritten the last one, as if he hadn't ignored every suggestion I made. Frank chuckled. Nah, son, don't bog her down. Claire's got better things to do than worry about real-world hustle. I put down my fork, and for a second, just one, I thought about flipping the whole damn table. Instead, I folded my napkin. Slowly. Precisely. Like the version of me they'd always tolerated. The agreeable daughter. The polite ghost. But ghosts don't bleed, and I was bleeding under the tablecloth. Frank leaned forward. The turkey was long forgotten. His voice lowered just enough to seem calm, just enough to cut. If you're so unhappy being part of this family, maybe don't come back next year. No one stopped him. Not even Marla. I looked at him. Really looked. At the man who'd taught me that silence was noble and emotions were weak. At the man who taught me how to disappear. Then let me save you the trouble I won't. Disowning works both ways. They just forgot I had a door to walk out of too. The automatic doors of the hotel whooshed open like they knew I needed release. A blast of November air nipped at my face as I walked in, clutching my coat tighter around me. I bypassed the front desk without making eye contact, and took the stairs instead of waiting for the elevator. My hands were still cold, but my jaw was set. Third floor. Room 327. Too much beige. The lighting was dim, apologetic. I dropped my bag on the faux leather chair and pulled open the curtains. Outside, snow flirted with the edges of the window pane. Madison's skyline blinked in sleepy dots of orange and blue. I didn't cry. That's a myth they sell about women, like tears are the default reaction to betrayal. I didn't feel broken. I felt clear. I toed off my boots and sat on the edge of the bed, flicking on the lamp beside me. Its shade was crooked, fitting. My laptop glowed as I opened it. Within seconds, I was in my online banking dashboard scanning numbers that looked more familiar than most family faces. I knew these digits better than I knew the sound of my father's laugh. And there, it was a pattern. Rent payments for the lake house that Zach managed. Monthly transfers to my parents' joint account. Groceries. Insurance top-offs. Even the heating bill for the main house, which had somehow been routed through my Amex. 80%. That's what I estimated after tallying up 3 years' worth of recurring payments. 80% of the family's expenses. Funded by me. I clicked through old wire transfers. Birthday gifts that doubled as bailout loans. Just a quick favor Sweetie Marla had said once when the furnace broke midwinter. Frank never asked directly, he had too much pride for that. But somehow the bills always found their way to me. A tightness bloomed in my chest, not sadness, recognition. I had been taught that family meant endurance, that the oldest child carried more weight because she could, and if she couldn't, she figured it out anyway. A memory rose like a ghost. I was 14 fingers hovering over piano keys in the school music room. I'd begged for lessons. Frank had said Zach needs tutoring in math. Maybe next year. That year never came. I closed the laptop and reached for the minibar. The gin was overpriced and underwhelming, but it burned just enough. I took a slow sip, then pulled out my phone. Tessa answered on the second ring. Well, did anyone throw mashed potatoes? I exhaled a laugh. No food was weaponized. Just me. Good. About time. There was a pause. The kind of silence you only get with someone who knows what not to say. I'm staying at the hotel, I added. I'm done pretending. Tessa's voice softened. So, now what? You gonna cut them off? I hesitated. But who's going to pay Dad's copay next month? That's not your job, Claire. I swirled the gin in its tiny glass bottle, watching the liquid catch the dim light. I know. But do you? She asked. Because you're talking like someone who still wants their approval? I leaned back against the headboard, feeling the weight of her words settle somewhere behind my ribs. Approval. The family currency I'd been chasing like a phantom paycheck. If I keep paying, I said slowly, I'm not generous. I'm complicit. There it was. The real voice. Not the conference call version of me, not the Thanksgiving guest. Just Claire, clear-eyed, unedited. I reached for the laptop again. This time with purpose. One by one, I went through every automatic payment. I disabled the heating bill, stopped the grocery card, shut down the transfer to my parents' mortgage account. Then I moved to the shared credit line. Zach had access to one I'd opened years ago when he needed help building business credit. I revoked his authorization. Then I closed the account entirely. The final click felt anticlimactic, no fireworks, no thud of justice, but something shifted. A quiet act of rebellion as clean as a knife sliding through butter. A moment later, my phone buzzed. Notification attempted withdrawal of $1 or $200 declined. Card 2431, account frozen at 11:43 p.m. I stared at the screen, half expecting a follow-up text from Zach. None came. Just the silence. But this time, it didn't feel like punishment. It felt like power. They only noticed I was gone when the power went out, and not just the literal kind. It started with the furnace. At 6:47 a.m., the Dawson family's digital thermostat began blinking a red error on the screen. The temperature had dipped to 32 overnight, and the house responded by groaning, then sighing, then falling into a cold silence. I watched from the glow of my hotel room, huddled under the same stiff blanket I'd curled into 6 hours earlier. The screen in my hand, the home security app I'd never been asked to disable, streamed a live feed from the hallway Nest Cam. Frank stormed into the frame like a man in combat. "Goddamn piece of garbage," he barked, jabbing the thermostat with a heavy finger. "Did someone mess with this?" Zach, no response. Marla entered seconds later, hair mussed, robe floral and flapping. "Try the circuit breaker," she offered, her voice already shaking. Frank muttered under his breath and stomped down the hall. The camera cut out as he disappeared into the basement stairwell. I flipped to another feed, the foyer. Zach stumbled in from the kitchen barefoot and bleary-eyed, clutching a half-empty energy drink. He looked like someone whose confidence had spent the night sleeping in a ditch. "What's his problem?" he grumbled. Marla sighed. "The furnace isn't working. And the pharmacy just called. They said your father's meds didn't go through. The card was declined." Zach paused, squinting. "Whose card? Ours?" she said, tapping her phone. "The joint account Claire set up." Remember, Zach froze. Then his face twisted into something between realization and outrage. "She did this," he said sharply. "Claire froze everything. She's trying to destroy us." There it was. The first sign that they'd felt the absence. Marla lowered her voice, her words trembling. "Call her. Apologize. Do something, Zach." "She's the one who should crawl back," he snapped. "She's always so smug, like we owe her something." "You don't think maybe we do?" she asked, quieter than I expected. He didn't respond. I stared at the screen, unmoving. No satisfaction, no vindication, just stillness. The room around me remained unchanged, sterile, dim, uneventful. My coffee sat cooling beside a room service tray I hadn't touched. I was warm. I was safe. And for once, I wasn't planning an escape or drafting a bailout plan. Tessa had texted 2 hours earlier. Still feeling guilty, I hadn't replied yet. I switched feeds again. Living room this time. Marla paced in tight circles, phone clutched to her chest like a talisman. Frank emerged from the basement, red-faced and muttering. Zach followed behind him, but his bravado had worn thin. "She's punishing us," Zach was saying. "You know how she is, always trying to control things with money." Marla didn't answer. She just stared at the fireplace as if it might ignite by sheer will. I thought about all the years I'd paid quietly, the root canal, the car repairs. That time, Zach maxed out his card buying early-stage software licenses that turned out to be a one-man Ponzi scheme. I thought about the time Frank forgot my birthday, but remembered to ask if I'd help co-sign for Zach's lease. I thought about how none of them had asked how I was doing after dinner last night. Not one call, not one knock on the hotel door. And then I smiled. Not out of spite, but clarity. I set the phone down, walked to the window. The snow had begun to fall again, clean and soft and honest, a blank slate. My phone buzzed. New message, Aunt Linda. "If you need backup. I've been watching for years." I stared at it, heart strangely still. Not alone. Not anymore. If they wanted to tally loyalty in dollars, I'd give them the exact numbers. The cursor blinked like a ticking bomb. Line by line, the spreadsheet unfolded methodical, brutal, irrefutable. File name, what I paid to stay loved.xlx. I hadn't meant for it to be poetic. I'd only planned to list the expenses item date amount. But somewhere between the rent transfer from January 2021 and Zach's emergency flight to Vegas for a pitch that never existed, the document had taken on a pulse. Rows scrolled downward like receipts from a life I never agreed to finance. Mortgage shortfalls, utility bills, bailout checks with just until payday in the memo line. I color-coded the tabs yellow for Zach, blue for Frank, and Marla gray for shared family costs that were never truly shared. Total 186,478. That didn't include time, or silence, or self-respect. Outside, the city groaned with winter wind. Inside, my apartment glowed cold blue from the screens. My coat still hung on the back of the chair. My suitcase remained half unpacked on the floor. I hadn't even bothered to restock the fridge. This wasn't about comfort anymore. It was about clarity. My phone buzzed. Emily, Zach's freaking out. He said the app deal's collapsing. Investors want proof of capital. And, apparently, Claire was the capital. I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. But I did take a long sip of tea before returning to the keyboard. There was a second document, less forensic, more final. A short letter, 3 paragraphs. Calm, professional. It read like a resignation, because it was. The subject line, formal withdrawal from financial and familial obligations. Each sentence had been rewritten, reviewed, restrained. No insults, no pleading, just facts, dates, and decisions. I had just inserted the final hyperlink, Zach's 2022 business account deposit history, partially funded by my emergency savings, when my inbox pinged. From Zach Dawson, subject. This is bigger than family. Don't ruin my life. I opened it. Read the first few lines. Claire. I know things got weird, but this is bigger than us. Bigger than Thanksgiving or feelings. I'm about to close a major round. Investors are watching. Don't make this ugly. Please. I stared at the word us as if it held any meaning. There had never been an us. Just me holding everything together behind the scenes while Zach took center stage. I clicked reply. Subject re. This is bigger than family. Then you shouldn't have built it on my back. I hit send. The second I did, I felt Tessa's name light up on my screen. I answered before the second ring. Well? She asked. I'm almost done, I said. Almost? I have one last thing to do. I hovered my cursor over the compiled documents, 3 files in total. What I paid to stay loved. The letter. A folder of supporting scans and payment confirmations. Attached. Addressed to Frank Dawson. Marla. Dawson. Zach Dawson. CC Extended Family. I'd considered blind copying lawyers, but this wasn't about lawsuits. Not yet. This was about truth. Naked, sharpened truth. I clicked send. There was no confetti, no dramatic score, just the soft whoosh of the email leaving my outbox and entering theirs. The silence afterward was clean. Final. A door shutting without slamming. I stood up, stretched, walked to the kitchen and opened the fridge out of habit. Empty. Fine. I could order something later. Maybe tomorrow. Tonight I was full. A minute passed, then another. My phone lit up again. Emily. You just became a legend. I leaned back against the counter. No, not a legend, just visible for the first time in 20 years. I didn't have a bat or a bomb, I had bank statements. That's how quiet revenge works. The first snow of December painted everything white but did nothing to warm the air. I watched flakes dissolve against the window pane, untouched and unbothered. The world was frozen. My anger wasn't. The envelope sat unopened on my desk, stamped with Zach's LLC logo. Brighter Path Ventures LLC, a name that sounded more like a TED Talk than a company. It had arrived 2 years ago, marked for your records. I'd filed it without reading. Now I read it. My name was printed clearly on the 5th page. Claire Dawson listed as financial guarantor and equity co-founder, non-voting. Non-voting. Convenient. All liability, no power. I pushed the papers aside and turned to the tabs already open on my laptop. A spreadsheet titled Startup Capital Trails blinked back at me with every entry cross-checked against old credit card statements, digital transfers, and business registration records from the state of Wisconsin. There were names on those documents I didn't recognize, vendors I never approved, consulting payments I never received. And somehow, my name and credit score sat beneath every dollar spent. I didn't need a bombshell to expose Zach. I had a paper trail. Tessa called while I was mid-scroll. Please tell me you're not on page 20 of Bank Hell. I'm on page 32. You need backup. I didn't argue. That was progress. Okay, she said. I reached out to Monica Blake. She's a lawyer. Not warm, not fuzzy, but she's good. Is this overkill? No, she replied. It's overdue. Monica called 15 minutes later. She didn't waste time. I've reviewed the 3 PDFs Tessa forwarded, she said. Do you know you could press charges? I blinked. For what? Start with identity abuse? Then throw in fraudulent misrepresentation, possibly tax evasion depending on how those business expenses were filed. Did you sign the LLC paperwork? Not knowingly. Then either he forged it or he misled you into signing under false pretenses. I looked back at the envelope, flipped to the last page. There it was, my signature. Except it wasn't mine. It mimicked my handwriting down to the sharp loop in the D of Dawson. But the slant was wrong. The pressure inconsistent. And I'd never signed anything with a fountain pen. I think he forged this, I said. Can you prove it? I still have the original email thread. He sent a blank attachment, asked me to review later, but said he just needed a placeholder signature for the file. I never sent it back. That's not just shady, Monica said flatly. That's prosecutable. I sat there staring at the page, ink on paper casual in its deceit. It wasn't the betrayal that stung, it was the certainty, the casualness. He'd known I wouldn't fight back. Until now. Zach's co-founder disappeared 6 months ago, I said quietly. Monica paused. Disappeared. Stopped returning emails. Left the state, I think. Rumor is, Zach owed him money. Then this is a pattern. I exhaled slowly. The printer hummed beside me, spitting out tax records I had requested the day before. Stacks of numbers lined the desk like silent witnesses. Claire Monica said, voice even. If you wanted to press charges, this wouldn't be a gray area. The first time I saw fear on Zach's face wasn't when I screamed. It was when I said nothing at all. It was the kind of cold that blurred breath against windows and turned door handles into metal threats. I picked the cafe carefully, neutral ground, upscale enough to suggest civility, busy enough to provide witnesses. Public shame wrapped in croissants and espresso shots. Zach arrived 5 minutes late, of course, draped in his usual smirk and a jacket too thin for the weather. Always choosing appearance over preparation. He didn't see the envelope in my hand right away. He saw my stillness and misread it. I knew you'd come around, he said, sliding into the seat across from me. Family right. His voice was a mix of old charm and new panic lacquered over the cracks. He gave a quick glance at the menu, not because he was hungry, but because he couldn't meet my eyes for more than a second. I didn't smile. I didn't answer. Instead, I reached into my bag and pulled out the manila envelope. Clean. Uncreased. I placed it gently between us like an offering or a threat. He looked at it then, at me, confused. He didn't touch it. What's this? He asked, still trying to sound casual. I didn't speak. Just waited. Eventually, he opened it. First, the forged LLC document signature page up front. Next, a copy of the loan application from Evermark Capital listing my name and social security number as co-signer. Then my personal letter revoking all financial obligations CC'd to Monica's office, with a note that a formal demand was pending. His fingers hesitated as he flipped the pages. His grin wavered. "You stole more than my money," I said quietly. "You stole my reputation." Zach let out a short laugh. It wasn't convincing. "Claire, come on, this is a misunderstanding. I thought you knew you were always backing me." It wasn't like malicious I didn't respond. He searched my face for softness, a crack in the armor. Found nothing. The barista walked by with 2 lattes and set one down next to him with a nod. She glanced at me like she sensed the tension. I gave her a tight smile. She didn't linger. "I mean lawyers?" Zach asked. "Isn't that a bit much?" "This stays in the family. Always has." I stood up. "You'll be hearing from one soon." He looked up. Finally rattled. "You wouldn't really do that, would you?" My coat was already in my hand. I slipped it on slowly, deliberately, and leaned just close enough to make the words land without volume. "You made the rules, Zach. I'm just playing your game better." I left him sitting there, surrounded by croissants, coffee, and the shards of whatever mirror he thought still reflected power. You'd be surprised how much damage a well-written email can do. The office smelled like old wood and sharper things, polished brass leather-bound codes of law faint cologne from a previous client. Monica Blake didn't offer coffee or comfort. She offered results. "You'll want to read the final version before I send it," she said, sliding the document across the desk. Her nails were short and filed with surgical precision. Her tone was more surgeon than sympathizer, too. I didn't sit right away. I read standing. One hand on the cool edge of the conference table, one foot still half out the door of who I used to be. The letter began, as expected. Subject: cease and desist. Unauthorized financial activity and identity misrepresentation. Beneath the legal tone was a quiet fire. Monica didn't dramatize, she itemized. Line by line, violation by violation. Zach Dawson's misuse of Claire Dawson's credit profile, fraudulent co-founder listing on LLC documentation, unauthorized debt leveraging, and forged signature on loan applications. Potential civil and criminal liability under Wisconsin State Statute 943.38 and 943.41. It ended with 3 crisp demands: immediate withdrawal of all financial instruments using Claire's name, return of startup funds transferred from Claire's accounts, written confirmation of compliance within 7 business days. I added one line at the bottom typed by my own fingers in bold. "This is the last time I let you hurt me without consequences." I looked up at Monica. "Send it." She nodded and clicked the mouse. One sharp sound, one digital scalpel. Somewhere in the world, Zach's inbox was about to get colder than this December morning. Less than an hour later, my phone buzzed. "Marla, text only. Claire. Please. Can't we settle this quietly? No hi. No, I'm sorry." Just the old tone shame disguised as diplomacy. I didn't reply. Not with words. Instead, I opened the folder Monica gave me and added the text to the appendix labeled Emotional Leverage Attempts. Post-action. Sometimes documentation is the only language people respect. It wasn't until the next morning that Zach's response came through his lawyer. Email subject: re-cease and desist. My client denies all allegations of wrongdoing. However, in the interest of resolving the matter promptly, Mr. Dawson agrees to withdraw all disputed documentation and will no longer use Claire Dawson's name or credit in future business dealings. No apology. No guilt. Just avoidance wrapped in lawyer speak. I read it twice, not because I didn't understand, but because I wanted to feel how little it hurt. Monica smirked when I forwarded it. He blinked, she said, eyes scanning the screen. Now's the time to push further or let him bury himself. When someone has nothing left to lose, they'll try to set fire to your peace. It started with a phone call I didn't expect to answer. Aunt Linda's name blinked on my screen as I stirred sugar into tea that had already gone cold. I let it ring 4 times before swiping. "Claire," she said, voice low. "He's scared. Scared men lie." I didn't ask who. I didn't have to. She continued like someone carefully diffusing a mine. "He's been calling around, saying things that frankly don't add up. Claims you've been unstable, vindictive, that you tried to tank his business because he turned down one of your ideas." I sat down. Slowly. Tea forgotten. A text buzzed from Emily. Screenshots. Zach in a family group chat I hadn't even realized still existed. "This is what happens when you try to help someone who can't help herself." Claire twisted my trust. She begged to be part of the startup. When I said no, she sabotaged it. "Look, I love my sister, but she needs help. This isn't normal behavior." No one replied. Emily added only, "No one's buying it. But still figured you should see." I didn't cry. I didn't throw my phone. I just stared at the wall, watching my own breath cloud the air. It was surreal the way someone who owed their entire launch to my bank account could rewrite me as the parasite. But this was Zach's specialty: build a story fast enough and loud enough, and most people wouldn't notice the cracks. He thought I'd stay quiet, that I'd retreat again into the fog of silence I used to live in. He forgot that silence in my hands is a scalpel. I opened my laptop, typed slowly, carefully, not to vent, but to document. "Hi all. Since there seems to be confusion circulating, I've compiled a brief clarification below. 14 Taro's $200 bridge loan deposited into Zach Dawson's account co-signed by me. $3,900 equipment purchased on my credit card billed to Dawson Solutions LLC. My name appears on 3 loan applications, 2 of which list forged signatures. Screenshots, notarized docs, and bank transfers attached below. This isn't about revenge, it's about accountability. And I'm done pretending my silence was anything but complicity. No flourishes, no insults, just facts, documented, time-stamped, calm." I hit post. It didn't go viral in the social media sense, but among the family web, the cousins, the old group threads, the aunt who works in HR, and the uncle who's suddenly very quiet, it detonated like a slow bomb. An hour later, Emily texted again. "He just deactivated his LinkedIn. You don't need to scream the truth, just show it." That's louder than rage. The folder was thicker than I remembered. Paper after paper, some printed on cheap home office stock, others slick from old toner margins, crooked. Monica flipped through them with her usual surgical precision, but I could feel it in her hands. Something was off. She paused, tilted her head. Then, "Claire, you didn't sign this, right?" She slid it across to me without turning the page fully, like it might bite. It was a loan application dated 4 months ago. $25,000 business line of credit. My name, my address, my social security number. And at the bottom, the signature. It looked like mine, but not quite. The flourish on the R was too sharp. The spacing between first and last name was tighter than I ever wrote it. Monica watched me carefully as my eyes scanned down the page again and again. "This was submitted to South Point Bank," she said. "I had my paralegal run a record search after your last email thread with Zach's lawyer. We were looking for linked financial activity." I leaned back in the leather chair, which squeaked louder than I expected. My mouth was dry. "This isn't a mistake," I said. "He didn't just fudge paperwork, he stole my identity." Monica didn't blink. "I already reached out to a financial investigator I trust." Quietly. "This could go criminal, Claire. I need to know what you want to do with it." My hands rested on the edge of her desk, fingers curled slightly inward, nails pressing into my palms. There was no rush of adrenaline, no cinematic crescendo in my chest. Just stillness. Cold and clean. "I'm not after revenge," I said, barely recognizing the calm in my voice. "I'm after closure. And a clean break." Monica nodded. "So we leverage." She pulled out another document, this one already drafted. Subject line, final formal notice. Termination of financial entanglement and potential litigation intent. In bold, bullet-pointed clarity, it laid out everything. The unauthorized use of my social security number, the fabricated digital signature, the loan currently under quiet review by a private investigator, a firm offer withdraw entirely from any project using my name, release all financial ties, or the next contact will come from law enforcement, at the bottom space for my signature. I took the pen and signed it without ceremony. We would email it that evening. Monica stood as I stood straightening the cuffs of her blazer, expression unreadable. This, she said, voice low, is the one that ends it. I didn't reply. Not because I didn't agree, but because for the first time in weeks there was nothing left to say. I left the office just after sundown. The sky was pewter, the air dry. I didn't put on gloves. I wanted to feel the winter. When I got home, I opened my laptop to a single message from Monica, subject line, sent. The body had only one sentence after this. You won't need to disown him. He'll erase himself. He thought he was hiding behind me. I just moved out of the way. The clink of champagne glasses was the only thing louder than the curated playlist humming through the speakers. The room was curated too, brick walls, faux greenery, Edison bulbs overhead, giving everything a warm but not too warm glow. Everyone here wore ambition like cologne, polished smiles, firm handshakes, the occasional practiced laugh. I didn't belong here, but I was invited. I'd RSVP'd under my full name, Claire Dawson, not as someone's sister, not as a donor or silent partner, but as myself. I hadn't even made it past the croissant tower when I felt it, the slow shift in conversation, the subtle cut in eye contact, the way people glanced behind me as if expecting a shadow. Zach had arrived. I didn't turn. I didn't need to. The buzz of him was everywhere, some kind of mixture of panic perfume and nervous charm. He was trying to make his usual rounds arms-wide voice louder than necessary, sprinkling half-truths into networking circles. But the air had changed. One man shook his hand and immediately wiped his palm on his jacket. A woman asked, "Weren't you on a panel last month with a tone that could slice bone?" Zach saw me before I looked at him. "Claire!" He called out loud enough to cut through the jazz saxophone. "Hey, you're really going to ignore your favorite brother?" People turned to watch. I turned too slow, deliberate. My heels were grounded, spine straight. He walked toward me with a grin that tried to be casual, the kind of grin that had once gotten him out of speeding tickets and loan denials. "Come on," he said. "We've had our rough patch, but we're still family, right?" The words hung between us like cheap tinsel. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't smile. I just said one line, "You forged my name." That's not family, that's fraud. Gasps are rare in professional spaces. This wasn't television, people didn't clutch pearls. But they paused. And in this room, silence was louder than scandal. Zach's grin twitched. His jaw flexed once, twice, before he dropped it into a look of mock confusion. "Wait, Claire. We don't need to do this here," he muttered under his breath. I tilted my head slightly. "I didn't do anything, Zach." "That's the difference." My phone buzzed in my hand. Monica Blake investor board dropped him. "Asset freeze in progress. They're pulling his pitch deck from the conference next week." I didn't look up from the screen until I'd taken a breath. Then I nodded. Once, tucked my phone into my coat and turned away. No shouting, no grand exit. I just walked. The most jarring sound was how many footsteps didn't follow him but followed me instead. I didn't return home for Christmas. I returned to myself. The snow fell in perfect silence, as if the sky itself had agreed to keep things gentle this year. Outside my window, the streets of Madison glowed with holiday lights. Inflatable Santas bobbed slightly in the wind. Porch railings wore their garlands like soft armor. Inside my apartment was still. No garland, no ornaments, Just me, a stack of unread books, and a mug of cocoa cooling beside a candle I'd lit for no one but myself. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel guilty about not going home for Christmas. I didn't even feel the absence of it. What I felt was clarity, a strange, quiet kind of peace that didn't need permission to exist. A card had arrived that morning, handwritten. The envelope was cream-colored, the ink, a familiar curling script. Marla. I didn't open it immediately. I let it sit beside the candle until the wax had run halfway down its stem. When I did open it, it smelled faintly of cinnamon. A Hallmark card, mid-tier, thoughtful, but not too personal. The kind with glitter that sticks to your fingertips. Inside, she'd written, "We all make mistakes. Come home." There was no apology, no acknowledgement of what had been said, done, or stolen. Just 5 words, and all of them avoided the truth. My phone buzzed. Aunt Linda. I answered without hesitation. "You got one too, didn't you?" she said. Her voice was warm, tired. "The card." "Yeah. You don't owe them the ending they expect, Claire." I nodded even though she couldn't see me. "I know." "Good. Then Merry Christmas in whatever way you want it to be." After we hung up, I sat by the fireplace for a while, the card still in my hand. I remembered being 7 asking for a snow globe. Not a fancy one, just something small with a reindeer or a tree. Marla said it was a silly thing that I was too old for stuff like that. But Zach got a remote control helicopter that year. He crashed it into the curtains and laughed so hard he spilled cider on the rug. No one got mad. I never got the snow globe. Later that afternoon, there was a soft knock at my door. Michael. He stood there holding a brown paper bag and something wrapped in tissue. "I know we said no gifts, but this doesn't count," he said. Inside the tissue, a tiny snow globe. A cabin in the woods, snowflakes that glittered when shaken. "You mentioned once you never had one." I didn't say thank you. Not right away. I just looked at it the way you look at a memory that finally showed up after decades of silence. He stayed for Coco. We didn't talk about family. We didn't talk about law firms or startups or reputations. We talked about snow, how it muffled the city, how it made everything feel paused. There was no romance in it, just stillness. And I didn't realize how much I needed that until the silence felt more healing than hollow. Later, after Michael left, I took the card from Marla and set it into the fireplace. I didn't crumple it. I didn't rage. I folded it once neatly and laid it on the logs like an offering. As it curled into flame, I whispered, "That's enough now." It wasn't revenge. It wasn't a performance. It was closure. My phone lit up on the table beside me. "Emily, they're blaming you for everything. Just thought you should know. They planted lies in frozen soil. Nothing grew. The cold in Madison this January feels personal, like even the wind has chosen sides. I'm standing by the window in my apartment watching the city shrink beneath a crust of ice. It hasn't snowed in days, but the sidewalks stay slick, as if the weather refuses to let anyone move forward. Emily's message came early this morning. "The house is in foreclosure. Dad hasn't spoken to anyone in a week." I didn't ask for details. I don't need them. I can see it all play out clearly in my mind. Frank fuming in his recliner, refusing help out of pride. Marla frantically reheating casseroles in a kitchen that's grown quieter. Zach probably pacing somewhere, convinced the world wronged him, too self-important to consider he did this to himself. I haven't answered Emily, not because I don't care, but because I care more about what I let inside these days. Pity has a way of disguising itself as obligation, and I've already spent too many years confusing the two. Michael swings by with 2 coffees in hand and a scarf wrapped too many times around his neck. "Black, no sugar," he says, placing mine on the windowsill. "You remembered." He shrugs like it's no big deal, but I see the faint smile. He doesn't ask about the family. He doesn't need to. I think he understands that some people grieve things long before they bury them. We sip in silence until my phone buzzes. Zach tried to launch the app again under a fake LLC. Emily again. Different name, different logo, same scam. The board caught it. He's banned from 3 platforms now. I don't respond. I feel nothing. No shock. No vindication. Just a blank, cold sort of knowing. Like watching ice crack and realizing you were never standing on it to begin with. Michael breaks the silence. Sometimes karma doesn't knock. It breaks in. I smile. Yeah. With a crowbar and no apology. He laughs a soft sound, and I realize how rare it's become for me to laugh with someone. Not at someone. Not because I'm masking pain. Just laughing. That night, I sit at my desk turning a chipped ceramic mug between my hands. The steam curls into the air like a question I've already answered. My inbox pings. From Zach Dawson. Subject: you win. Are you happy now? I stare at the subject line for a long time. Not because I'm tempted to gloat, but because that sentence says everything I always feared about him, that this was a game. That he believed someone had to lose for me to feel whole. That he never saw the damage, only the scoreboard. I don't hesitate when I reply. This was never about winning. It was about stopping the bleeding. I don't say more. I don't have to. The message isn't for him anyway. It's for the girl I used to be. The one who thought keeping everyone else afloat was the only way to earn love. The one who smiled at Thanksgivings where her worth was served last, if at all. The one who paid in silence and receipts and guilt. Outside, the snow starts again, soft, persistent. I don't rush to answer Emily. I don't text Aunt Linda. I don't reread Zach's email. Instead, I close my laptop and breathe. For the first time in weeks, I let the silence feel like peace instead of punishment. Not everything frozen is lifeless. Some things are just waiting to thaw. If someone had believed me sooner, maybe I wouldn't have had to believe myself so hard. It arrived in an envelope thick enough to demand attention. Cream-colored hand addressed, the kind of stationery people only use when they have something real to say. No return address, but I didn't need one. The handwriting gave her away before I ever peeled back the flap. Aunt Linda. The weight of it wasn't just paper, it was history. Years of unsaid things packed between pages folded with care. I didn't open it right away. I let it rest on my desk under the last streaks of January sunlight, fingers hovering, breath held. Then I sat down, turned off my phone, and let the silence stretch around me like a blanket. The first line read, "Claire, I should have written this a decade ago." What followed wasn't apology, it was confession. And it was somehow more holy than either. She wrote about the Thanksgiving in 2011 when I'd tried to tell Marla that Zach was taking money from Dad's account. Linda had overheard the entire thing. She'd seen the look on Marla's face, sharp, defensive, performative, and said nothing. Not out of malice, out of fear. She admitted to watching Frank belittle me for years while pouring praise on Zach for showing up with a half-baked idea and a charming smirk. She remembered the time I got into grad school and no one clapped. How Zach got a standing ovation for announcing he was thinking of starting a podcast. She remembered everything. You were always the strongest one, she wrote. You weren't just surviving, you were financing everyone else's survival. And no one said thank you. My hands trembled. Not from anger, from being seen, because I hadn't realized how lonely it had been, how loud it was carrying that kind of silence for so long. I don't know when the tears started. Not the big cinematic ones, but the quiet, leaky kind. The ones you try to wipe away before they fall onto the paper. I leaned over the pages, breath hitching, not out of grief, but out of relief. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't the problem. Someone saw it. Someone finally said it out loud. The last paragraph said simply, "I'm sorry I waited so long to believe the truth I already knew." I folded the letter back with reverence, smoothing each crease like a sacred artifact. I could feel a knot inside me begin to uncoil tight for years, now loosening without pain. Tessa called as the sun dipped below the skyline. I answered on the second ring, still wiping my cheek with my sleeve. "You okay?" she asked. I didn't answer right away. Then I said, "It wasn't all in my head. Someone saw it." Tessa went quiet just for a beat. "Then I always saw it too. But I'm glad someone in the bloodline finally said it." That night, I found a frame tucked in the back of my closet, one I'd bought for a diploma that never got hung. I opened it, placed the letter inside. Not for display, but for myself. Proof. Not sentiment. When people doubt you long enough, you start questioning your own reality. But now I had this ink on paper. Not in my voice. Not twisted by guilt or obligation. Just truth documented. I set the frame on the shelf near the window next to the snow globe Michael had given me. Symbols of the two things I never had growing up: softness and belief. I sat down and wrote a letter in return. Not long. Just a page. Thank you for being family, even if it took years. Every single view means a meal for someone in need. Just by watching this video, you're giving warmth, hope, and a full plate to those less fortunate. So watch now, share now, subscribe to the channel, and let's spread love together. They didn't change. I did. That was the ending I needed. The Arboretum is half empty on a February afternoon. The kind of stillness only comes after snow, not a storm, but the gentle kind, the kind that doesn't scream for attention, but covers everything anyway. I walk without music, without a destination, the air crisp enough to make my breath visible. It's been weeks since I left anything unfinished. No messages left on read, no late-night replies, no emotional overdrafts. My phone buzzes once in my coat pocket. I don't reach for it right away. When I do, the subject line stares up at me like an old bruise. "Let's reconnect. Love, Mom." The kind of email that pretends nothing happened, that skips over facts and lands on tone as if warmth can overwrite betrayal. I swipe it away. Not deleted, just unacknowledged. Not because I'm angry, but because I'm finally done being the one who explains everything. I'm tired of justifying why I chose peace over family. I don't owe anyone an encore. The path curves and dips into a line of old trees, bare but dignified. A cardinal flickers past a flash of red against the white. I think of Linda's letter again, tucked safely in the framed glass near my window. How her words stitched something closed inside me without needing stitches. Up ahead, I see it. Their old house, still standing, but not the same. A for sale sign leans in the snow. The front porch looks hollow, like it's been emptied too fast and too late. I slow down, but I don't stop. I've spent enough years waiting on that porch, in person, in memory, in metaphor. Always hoping someone would open the door and say, "We were wrong." That someone would notice the silence wasn't mine, it was theirs. But no one ever did. And now it doesn't matter. I walk on. My phone rings. Michael. "Hey." I answer, voice soft from the cold. "Are you still out walking in the snow like a poem?" he teases. "Maybe," I say. "There's a kind of quiet that makes sense out here." He pauses. "Dinner later?" I smile. Not because I need the invite, but because I can choose it. "Maybe," I reply. I'm not hiding anymore. There's something in his exhale that feels like understanding. Not possession, not rescue, just presence. I hang up and keep walking. By the time I reach the clearing near the small frozen pond, I stop. Pull out my phone again. Open contacts. Frank. Marla. Zach. I press down on each name one at a time. Delete, delete, delete. Not out of spite, out of clarity. Closure isn't a door slamming. It's knowing you don't need the door anymore. I tuck the phone away. The snow begins to fall again. Soft, steady. No drama. The world is quiet. For once, so is my mind.